So all the students are present. Yes. So we're gonna continue with class. Today we're gonna start with the dietary traversal attack. So dietary traversal. So what we can know about the word called dietary is a folder. Traversal means to bypass or jump. So over here you will see a traversal attack, a dietary traversal attack. So we can see they have given some images over here. For example, they have an URL. For example, they have a load image question mark parameter with the value. So as I mentioned you before, the load image question mark file name is equal to xxx.png. So if I explain this one, so let's try domain name file type dot programming language question mark parameter is equal to value. So if we compare this one with this, file type over here is our load image, and the parameter we have is file name, a file name which is from interconnected with the database server, and we can see the value which is over here. Same this one. For example, they have given ../../. This is basically used to forward our query to the root access. For example, let me tell you about the dietary traversal attack. So in the first ... this is basically mean to jump a section of directory, and .. /// is basically used to get to the root access. Fine. So in this scenario, if you go down, you will see something like .. to get the etc password, which contains all the username on the server side, just like our own server. Cat etc password, which contains all the users over here on the database server. For example, the most common things we're gonna look for is how the dietary traversal works. So dietary traversal is also known as path traversal attack. Is a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to read arbitrary files on the server that is running an application. This might include application code and data credentials for backend systems and sensitive operating system files. In some cases, an attacker might be able to write an arbitrary file on the server, which is called file inclusion attack, and allow them to modify application data behavior and ultimately take over control of the server. So this kind of attack is also known as file inclusion attack. If you find any dietary traversal attack on any of the web application, you can try the file inclusion to simply fetch the files. For example, over here they have given the reading arbitrary files are by dietary traversal attack. For example, you can see they have given image source. Where can they load the source? This is a JavaScript, a normal simple JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, they're simply saying fetch the image source from the load image file name is equal to 281.png, which is a file over here. The load image URL takes file name parameter and return the content of the specific file, which is this one. The image file themselves are stored in a disk in location of where www image. Where www image, where your application has hosted. For example, where www. So over here they have given image. You can simply put a folder of image. So it means on this where www you have a proper file name image which contains all the database servers. So what we can do over here, to return an image, the application append to request file names to be basic directory and uses a file system API, an application to read the content of the file. For example, the file which is stored over here is 2188 is on the where.w directory file. But the application implement no defense against directory traversal attack. So an attacker can request the following URL to retrieve the arbitrary file from the server systems. For example, if there is a website called insecurewebsite.com, there will be a file path from the etc password. And we can see this was for directory and this was to get a root access for the file. For example, you will see this causes the application to read the following path where www image file, which is on the backend source. We can only see this one, but in the backend they have given a proper path or variations. That's why most of the hackers, most of the pen testers, they perform a debugging mode to penetrate or simply secure the web applications. For example, the sequence .// is valid a file path and means to set up a level in directory structure. 3 consecutive sequence where www images to represent root file, which I mentioned you already, which is also used for getting the etc password. For example, we have something like on Unix based operating system, this is standard file containing details. The user that is registered to on the server. On the Windows both we can use // or // as valid directory traversal sequence. And an equivalent attack to retrieve a standard operating system. For example, we can see if we are simply getting the information about the Windows, you can go to the Windows win.in if that's a Windows operating system. So, for example, we're going to try to check how the file path traversal attack looks like. So, over here, we're going to use the file path traversal simple case. So this lab contains a file path traversal attacks, and to solve the retrieve the content, we have to get the etc password. You just check the solution, but let's get the access to the lab. So over here we have a proper website. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna try to manipulate the data. For example, let's try with this one. So before I'm going to capture the packet with the trust bump. So over here, what I did, I simply did view details. So let's see the request. So over here, I have a get parameter with the product ID number 1. Product ID number 1. So let's forward a session. Let's see what will happen. We need the file name. So we have image file name, which in 35.jpg. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna send this request to the repeater mode. On the repeater, you can see this is highlighted, and we can check the request has been captured over here in the proper way. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna try to simple path traversal attack. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change the value of the PNG. So let's try with the etc password. No such file over there. We can see 400 bad request. Let's try with the .. to jump a directory. No file path. So let's go to the root file access. And over here we can see 200 OK requests from the server side, which contains all the usernames on the server side in a proper manner. We can see root, daemon. These are all the user which contains on the server side. So let's drop this one. We know that there's an attack. So the main objective of your attack is to simply manipulate the data or the request which you get. Show response in browser, copy the URL, and you can copy over here. But this is a different thing. We can see only the request on the parameter values. So in this labs, when you get a proper attack, congratulations, you have solved the lab. So there are different kinds of attacks that you can perform, but the main objective is to check the parameter values is proper sanitized or not. The client is basically change the parameter value to simply manipulate or change the content values. So you can see over here, the most important part is to check each and every content files. For example, let's try with this one. Common obstacles to exploiting the file path traversal vulnerabilities. Many applications that place user input into the path implementation, some kind of defense against file path traversal attack, and these can be often circulated. If an application stripe or block directory traversal sequence, then the user supplied file name, then it might be possible to bypass the defense using a variety of techniques. It means when we are doing a // it could be blocked on the server side. So some of the attacker they simply do what? File name etc password. You might be able to use an object path from the file store group, such as to directly reference a file name without using the traversal sequence. So let's try with this one. Okay, so on the proxy, let's try over here. Okay, let's load the page. Okay, the page has been loaded. Open, view, and we can see the request. So we can send this on repeater. Okay, sorry, we don't have to send this one. Forward, Academy in there. Over here, image file. So send to repeater for the modification, and over here, as per the data, the client request will be simply blocked. So we can't use this one. Let's try to use this one first of all. No such file. So sometimes when you have to execute the file, you have to do a proper etc password. Sometimes the server side block the // you can say whitelisting. A substitution should be placed over there. So in this scenario, the most important part when you're trying to enhance the request, you have to check each and everything. And most of the cases, what we do, we perform a brute force attack on this parameter value to get a proper attack. In the real scenario, we will simply use some file path traversal attack with the GitHub scripts. A directory traversal attack. You can see the payload. And the payload will be get from any of the website. You can try the GitHub also. You can try the cheat sheet. So over here, you can see tools. There is a tool. I think there is a tool called .pondwl. You can see -h for host, -m method, which is FTP, -t type should be 300, -f the format, the file we want to accept, etc shadow file, S for sequence. So they have given all the things one by one. So the basic exploitation, you can see we can use .. characters to access the parent directory to the following string. There are several encoding that can help to bypass a poorly implemented filter. See this one, .. // You can use encryption standards. There are many things. 16-bit Unicode encoding. UTF encoding encryptions. Bypass, replaced one. They have given all the things that you want. See? These are the files that you can investigate. Interesting files on the etc issue, password, shadow file, groups, host. These are the files that you can simply create. Or if you talk about the Windows, you will get some files like XML or boot.init. You can get the log files. The following log files are controllable and can be included in the event below, like access logs, error logs. Reference you can read about here, and you can go to the word list. You can simply create your own word list, common paths, and you can either perform a brute force attack on the specific parameter value because we don't know which parameter will work, which encryption standard will work. So the most common thing you can use this encryption standards, and you can merge those things. So over here, there are lots of other things that you can use. For example, you might be able to use nested traversal sequence such as dot 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 forward slash or dot 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 backslash forward slash, which will revert the simple traversal sequence when the inner sequence is stripped. So in this lab, there are lots of things that you can proceed with.